Hey all, it's Alexander Quinn here, your friendly neighborhood advisor. Today I'm going to be telling you about screening tenants, tips that I've learned along the way that can help you to just kind of avoid mistakes that a lot of other starters make. So tip number one is going to be to determine what it is that you want from a tenant, what your goals are. You can just kind of start with what everyone else does. That's what I recommend if you're not sure. Just kind of see what other people typically do. Start with their process. Decide if there's any like big things that you know for sure you're not going to want to have part of yours. And anything you're not sure about, just kind of like run with it, see what happens. And any issues you have will come up obvious to you over time as to why it should or shouldn't be done. But until then, if you're uncertain about their process, well, until you have something better, leave it be, because it currently is the best thing. It's someone's doing it and it works, it's popular, it's whatever, it's there for a reason. And so if you don't have something better, just kind of leave it, start with what someone else does, use that as a template, and it'll clear up a lot of like the issues of analysis, paralysis, etc. Now when you're doing that, figure out what your goals are, figure out what it is you're after for a tenant. I know everyone's after pretty much the same thing, but some people are a little bit different, and it might depend on what your market is, your demographic, how desperate you are to get someone in, etc., how well you are at other things, your resources, if you can do background checks, etc. So what I would say is, as far as your goals go, I prefer tenants that have longevity, where they're going to stay for a while. That is kind of a bigger focus of mine, and also I have found it to work out really well. Other people also say they wish they did that in hindsight, so I focus on longevity, how long they're going to stay in the home more so than pretty much anything else. But also I'm going to talk about some of my mistakes on things I should have focused more in the past, and now I just kind of have a solid process that works that I'm also currently testing out. All right, so if your focus is like, you just want to make sure they pay, you want to avoid eviction, fine. Okay, then make sure that your questions are tuned to that. And that sounds like a bit of common sense, but I would say to go a little bit deeper than that. I would say figure out exactly what levers really determine whether or not a person is going to be in that area, what demographic is going to be doing that in the area that you are renting out. If it's in a lower class area, for example, or if it's near a school, if there's a lot of college kids in the area, then you want to try to attract them somehow, some way, if you can, and maybe prioritize them, because people that go to college typically are on top of their stuff more often than people that are not. So look at kind of what's available in the area and what type of person in that area is what you're going for, and kind of cater to that demographic and figure out what questions are tailored more to that. The reason why this makes a difference is because someone going to college might actually have no rental experience or no income. So then your questions might actually disqualify them if they are the best fit for what you're doing. And again, this also fits to the property type that you're doing as well, whether it be rent by the room, duplex, multifamily, etc. So tip number two I'm going to say is, with your process, you want to keep your process consistent. Again, that's a no-brainer, but what tends to happen that people don't realize is they will say, here's my questions, and then they will make exceptions for them. Now, you do probably want to make exceptions for them, but you should still have a clear-cut criteria on what the exceptions can or can't have. I tend to say you can explain away one thing, one criteria you don't meet. More than that, it just kind of, the stars aren't aligning. There's too many things, too big of a chance that, what are the chances that they don't have documentable credit or this, right? So you might say if they're a student, that's an exception. Or you can kind of wrap things up into saying income or this, right? So income or proof of that you're not, that, or you, in your own criteria that you set, you can just put out there, here's the, what's your income, what's this, etc. And then when you take it back, you just have your own criteria saying, if they're a student, here's the path, and if they're not a student, here's the path. And then on there, if anything doesn't add up, you say, okay, well, here's where the letter of explanation can come in if they are excusing away one thing, such as income, etc. So if they're excusing away income, you should still have, here's things that I accept. If they have an issue for the last couple of months, what is acceptable and what is not? What seems like they're just kind of trying to escape another situation and going to whoever will accept them, and then they won't pay you because they can't, versus they have a genuine exception, this never happens to them, and they still have a solid job lined up once they're done with this, whether it be a medical, handicap, disability, or just they're temporarily in the hospital, etc. Things like that. Or they really have been looking for a job, but they'll probably find one soon, and there's not some hidden behind the scenes thing going on, like a possible addiction, making it so that they can't retain or obtain new employment. So do your best figuring out like what evidence makes that look solid enough to where you believe it, or just kind of do away with it altogether and say, here's, you could keep it simple and say, here's the criteria, you meet it or you don't. People who do it that way usually do better. It's a better, easier, more enjoyable profession with less risks when you do it that way. So when I advise other people, I usually advise that they'll probably be happier if they do it that route. However, even though I say that, I personally don't do that. I have a bit of a bleeding heart on my side, so I just feel like kind of seeing where those nuances are, the people that need help, where hopefully it's not going to be a problem for me. Usually I end up being a little bit wrong, but I actually still perform better than the average person anyway, so I guess I'm just kind of leveraging my intelligence with my, I guess, admittedly knowingly poor choices. But anyway, so tip number 3 that I'm going to say is with your questions, when you put them out, to have, so this kind of ties in with I've kind of covered this a little bit, but basically the evidence that supports them. You want to double check on it. You want to make sure that you're not being faked and frauded, because I have found that that is extremely common for documents to be faked and forged in some form. It's interesting because some will be obvious to you and some won't. It depends on who notices the signs of what types. And so I've had some come across that were obvious fakes that I didn't notice for a second. And I was like, oh yeah, this looks fine. And then after a bit, I was like, wait, there's nothing on this page. They blacked out everything as if they were like covering up sensitive info. But I realized there wasn't a logo, there wasn't a company name, and I realized how badly it would have been if I actually took that in. And it was because I didn't have a process for it, and because I wasn't double checking. When you ask people for, let's say, their employment, etc., you don't want them to provide the documents. If possible, you want to get the information to where you can do it. So get the name of the company or the phone number to the company, and then first you just look up that company to see if that number matches that company. If the number doesn't match, then you kind of want to figure out what's going on there, especially if it's really far. But if it's close to the same number, maybe it really is that company. If you call and they answer saying, hey, this is, I'm just going to make up a company name that, no association if there's a real company out there, but hey, this is Apex Corp, right? So then it's like, oh, that sounds like it really is Apex Corp. And also what you could do is, if the number's close, you could say, well, I don't know for sure that it's fake, but the number you look up, I would call that number actually. Call that number and then ask them, hey, so I have this other number for you and I just wanted to check, or tell them the situation of what's going on. Say, hey, look, I have someone who's trying to get a place and they gave me a different number. Does this number also go to Apex Corp, etc.? And then you can just ask them, I don't know that you can legally verify whether or not someone works there without some type of signed consent from them, but usually if they give me a legitimate number, it's solid. I haven't regretted that. I haven't had someone where it turned out they didn't really work there, etc. Although I'm sure there will be people out there, so maybe you want to go the extra step or figure out what that is. But in the meantime, if you're just starting out, just kind of try to keep things simple and try to make the process easy, and then slowly determine what's the most important thing to improve on each time you go through the process, so that you're kind of learning as you go and getting some things locked in solid and more concrete. Otherwise, you're going to have too many things to look at, and you're going to run into analysis paralysis. So just double check on anything that's quick and easy, especially, and you can just do a quick lookup to see if they gave you a legitimate number for a legitimate company name, and that's pretty easy to do. If you get a bunch of things where the company doesn't add up, this doesn't add up, that doesn't add up, that's when you really want to say, no, I'm not doing this unless I can get some solid proof somewhere, because one person with something kind of maybe not be, something's a little off, that's normal. But when you have multiple things, then it usually is like, you know what, this is pretty unusual, this is very unlikely, and statistically, in my experience, has always, if they have more than one thing they can't prove, then it's almost always that something, that they're a risk factor, even if it's not illegitimate. But if they can't explain it away, and if they don't have solid proof for anything, it's like, what are the chances that they don't have pay stubs and don't have like rental proof and don't have yeah. So if I don't see something solid out of period, then I am saying no. No matter how legit it looks, it's probably not. Anyway, I hope to help somebody out there. You all have a wonderful day.